I was your son, and you let me die. But why am I surprised? We both know it wasn't the first time.
The 5th episode of Foundation's 2nd season is all about memories. For the 2nd week in a row, we focus on 2 of the 4 main stories that we've been following. And we see how that idea of memory plays a crucial role in the story around Harry and his new body, and Brother Day's plans for an imperial marriage. Both Harry's and Salvor's memories are used against them. A wedge is formed between them when Brother Dawn and Dusk learn that Day has a unique power related to their memories. And Queen Sareth learns of Demerzel's big secret when she gets her hands on memories that show her in a compromising position. And since Sareth's quest for information about her family's accident acts as the bridge between episodes 4 and 5, let's start with her. Last week we learned when Rue returned to Cloud Dominion after being bedded by Cleon the 16th, the scientists there studied her memory manipulation to reverse engineer the process. That allowed them to offer protection to one of Cleon's personal guards whose memories are audited weekly in an effort to find out if Brother Day was behind the death of her family. In episode 5, Markley reports that he's unable to get a hold of anything related to the assassination attempt because it happened in Day's bedroom. This convinces Sareth that she needs to do what's necessary to get inside to look around for herself, so she sends word to Day that she wants to copulate. Brother Day and Demerzel prepare for his encounter, and it's clear that he's grown accustomed to her robotic charms in that regard. She assures him that he is a superstar lover with nothing to worry about, and says it's a good thing because he wanted to forge a real alliance rather than a paper one. She slips away with a sort of fist pump for encouragement and tells him to think of her. Despite Rue's concern, Sareth doesn't appear to be out of her element in Day's chambers, not at first anyway. But the truth is she's way more concerned with looking around than sleeping with him, and she notices the repairs from the attack and that he wears his aura even when he's intimate. There is some playful but ultimately awkward foreplay, and it's clear that Brother Day is uncomfortable. When he can't perform, he turns it on her, accusing her of putting on an act, which is true. And then the tone changes completely when he reveals that he knows she had a lover and lost them in the accident that killed her family. She immediately fires back with the question, "Why am I not surprised you know so much of my family's final days?" It escalates from there. He noticed that she was checking things out. She claims she did that because she was worried about her safety. She is going to live there together with him after all. And things devolved into a full-blown shouting match that ended in him assuring her that he could protect her, and then both parties agreeing to get married. Later, he'll explain to Demerzel that Sareth expects he killed her family, so he had to accuse her of trying to kill him. It got heated, and now they're engaged. The sex never happened, and Day really did look a little lost with a partner other than Demerzel, but both he and the future Empress Consort held their own in every other regard. The big reveal happens here when Demerzel assures him that she made sure there is no trail back to him for the killing of her family. She says it so matter-of-factly that I had to go back to make sure that's what she was saying. But it is, and that's one big mystery for this season solved. This means that Sareth is right about what happened, but then you pretty much believe Demerzel when she says she covered their tracks and that no one will find any proof. From there we flash back to 30 years earlier to Cleon the 16th's time with Rue. He looks a lot more at home with taking a lover than 17 was. And I suppose the stakes aren't the same, but there is a noticeable difference between these Cleons. The flashback turns out to be Dusk and Rue watching their video together in his room. They're snuggled up in bed, which suggests that some chemistry might still exist, or at the very least, she does a better job of faking it than Sareth did. She asks to go back to relive the moment when they first met at Gossamer Court, and he obliges. We see that she used a unique strategy of refusing to look up from her game when he approached, and quickly won over his affection. He's curious about her missing memory. She says she doesn't really notice it at all. She remembers taking his hand, and then she was on a transport home with a bite mark on her shoulder and a fat bank account. This leads to her bringing up something he hadn't considered when she says she could imagine if they have that ability, they might edit their own memories that they would rather forget. She realizes that it might cause problems because things can't be lost to history, but he explains that they would still be stored with their other audits in the memoriam. There's this idea of an end to regrets, and she says she wouldn't want to erase her memories even if she could, and that he's lucky to be able to trust his memory. The conversation and that last statement plant the seeds for what we see him do next when he goes to Demerzel to ask her about it and learns that only Brother Day has the authority to edit his memories, his own memories, but that also extends to editing Dusk and Dawn's. This is a change that happened after the attack because Day was suspicious that they might have played a part in that, and even when he found out that they were innocent, he kept his new exclusive power, which causes a problem for Dusk, because he points out that even though there are backups, they would never know if edits were made since it wouldn't feel like something was missing. Demerzel assures him that if Day did something that was out of line, she'd be forced to intervene since her directive is to at all times do what's best for Empire, not just Day. It's a reasonable assurance, and Dusk pretends to accept it, but the way that they present the scene, the way it's shot, certainly prompts the viewer to question how sincere she's being. In the meantime, Sareth tells Rue that the engagement's on, and everything she learned when she was in Day's bedchamber. She tells Markley they need to find out what happened in that room on the day of the attempt, and he explains there's no way to get access to a Cleon's memories. And from there, Sareth comes up with the idea to try to get access to someone who was there to take care of his wounds, one of the doctors who was there after things went down. He goes to see the keeper at the memoriam and gets the information. There is some pushback, but nothing he can't manage by saying he's just doing what he's been told. Markley brings them the recordings, and when they watch it, Sareth and Rue see Demerzel standing there with her head cut in half, and they now know that she was in the bedroom with him and that she's a robot. This is a pretty big deal, as they quickly point out as they're putting things together. Obviously, everyone has wondered how Demerzel has served all the Cleons for the past 4 centuries without aging. Sareth brought up that she must be a clone when they visited the Principium. Like everyone else, they believed that all the humaniform robots were destroyed millennia ago, and now they know the genetic dynasty is keeping at least one big secret from the public. In light of the new revelations about their memories, Dusk teams up with Dawn. First, they go to ask Cleon the First memory a question, which is a thing they can do apparently. They explain the situation, but Cleon isn't having it. He says they're all the same man, so basically there should be no problem. Envying Day is like envying themselves. Of course, they know this is no longer true because of genetic drift, but don't want to expose that fact to him. They try to bring up the idea that clones are genetically the same, but still have variations because of their temperaments, but this doesn't sway the original. He assures them that it's not a problem, and that's the end of the conversation. From there, they go see the Keeper, where they inadvertently cover Markley's tracks by brushing off his question about not finding what they were looking for earlier. They want to see how big their memory archives are, and ask for all 18 of them for the sake of comparison. As they wait, they bond over their diminishing importance. Dawn asks earnestly if they're in danger. After all, they're still Empire. They discuss a mural depicting Emperor Algarin, who was executed for high treason. There's a green stripe added after the fact to his mural to indicate this, and that opens the door for Dusk to discuss how he struggles with his personal legacy, saying that when a man is old, he doesn't care what he remembers, he cares how he's remembered. And he wonders aloud if Day didn't do Dawn a favor by giving away his chair, because now he can have what he always wanted, and what every young man wants, to live a life and to love. There's a great line when he looks at Dawn and says, "I was so beautiful." It highlights all the interesting ways you can play with this idea of clones and the connections they still have, but also how Day is removing himself from their confidence with his actions. They find out that their memories more or less look similar to the other clones, but they notice that the original Cleon has almost 3 times as many as them. Dawn points out that he was special, so it's not that surprising, but Dusk thinks it's too much of a difference, and that things just don't add up. He says they won't do anything about it though, not yet, not until he can find some leverage. Elsewhere in the galaxy, Harry is visited by a vision of Rach who reminds him of some things that he might like to edit out of his own memory. His visitor tells him it's not a dream and that he's not alive. He did, in fact, die on the Deliverance. And it reads like a manifestation of Harry's regrets about what happened there. and that this vision of Rach doesn't want him to forget. He tells an emotional Harry that he has everyone fooled into thinking he cares about them, which is something that Gaal contradicts later. Rach says the truth is that he doesn't care about anyone, that they're all just points on a graph, and then he adds that they both know something like this happened before. It's not readily apparent to me what he's talking about here, and then he just disappears. This makes it sound like Harry has another secret he's keeping from everyone, something only Rach might know, and we'll find out later on Ignus that the new mentallic character, Tellem Bond, is the one that's behind this. There's still no easy explanation for how he came to be inside this new body, and we do see him getting used to it. No big surprise, Salvor and Gaal would like to understand, but all he can tell them was that while he was in the Prime Radiant, Callie told him to come to Una's world. He was in the darkness of the cave, and the next thing he remembers is waking up next to Gaal in a body just like the one he had right before he died. Their quick conversation sort of works like a checklist for possibilities as they go through it. In the end, things seem to be pointing in the direction that he is in a clone body and Callie is a robot. Gaal jokes that after a century and a half, the genetic dynasty has a rival, and the irony isn't lost on Harry, and Salvor piles on saying, and after all that trouble you went through to turn yourself into an idea. She tells them that she's picked up some transmissions and can see what the Foundation is up to. The whole selling psychohistory as magic and pushing Harry as a prophet in their religious phase. Harry makes the distinction that it's the other version in the vault that's their prophet, and adds that it was bound to happen because people do love to kneel. They make it to Ignus but lose control of the ship as they enter the atmosphere, causing Salvor to make a crash landing. On the way down, she noticed someone was watching them and leaves to go looking because she would rather meet them outside. On the trail, she hears a noise, so she's able to get a jump on a hooded character holding a knife. At gunpoint, she has him remove his mask and is shocked to see that it's Hugo. He tells her that after she left, he went into cryo sleep too, syncing his pod to the beggar so that he would be woken up automatically when she woke up. Skeptical as she is, it makes enough sense because being the third wheel with a mom she barely knows hasn't been as awesome as she thought it might be. And wouldn't it be great if Hugo was there? They kiss and it's heartfelt and it seems too good to be true because it is. Inside the ship, Harry apologizes to Gaal in one of the most human moments we've seen from him. He knows she's struggling with her vision of Salvor's death, and he offers that the whole premise of psychohistory is that the future isn't set in stone. Intellectually, Gaal understands this, but she also knows that all of her visions have come true. He would argue that on Synax she dreamt about the giant wave crashing down on her, and it didn't. But while this is technically true, there's still no way to know how they could change their decisions right now in a way that would save Salvor later. It just doesn't work that way. And this is far and away the most interesting conversation they've had. There's real sincerity in his words about Rach and Salvor being his granddaughter, but there's also the reality that none of that changes what he knows about psychohistory. So Gaal's insistence that he can't bring himself to care about anyone isn't the complete picture. The plan affects everyone, and knowing what he knows gives him a sense of responsibility. To act in accordance with that means to overlook the way his decisions relate to individuals. This comes out when Gaal is asking about how they would know which of their actions would stop Salvor's fate. Matter-of-factly, they can't. They both understand this, and the extra layer for Harry is that even if they could, would it be right to intervene anyway? He gives her some good advice to make the most out of the time he has with Salvor right now, since not everyone gets that, and then they see her return with Hugo. This sets off alarm bells for Harry right away, and he tells Gaal to hide the Prime Radiant and not tell him where it is. He locks them out, and when he realizes he can't prove his suspicions that this person isn't Hugo, he tells Salvor to retransfer control of the ship to him because it would still recognize him biologically. And then things break down from there. Gaal notices others approaching the ship. Hugo is revealed to be a local man who can make themselves look like anyone, I guess, and access Salvor's memories of Hugo. And then his cohorts breach the beggar's hall with a charge. After a brief struggle, they gain control and they do something with their minds to make everyone fall asleep. Gaal, Harry, and Salvor wake up as prisoners, though not really in a cell. Instead, they're in an abandoned Imperial summer palace, which looks like it's from another time, almost ancient. Harry says it likely belonged to Emperor Kandar V. But before they can get into the history, Gaal and Salvor hear voices in their heads calling to them. They make their way to what looks like a ceremony and meet a child and her followers that introduces herself as Tellem Bond. She welcomes them, and when Salvor only introduces herself with her first name rather than her full name, and where she's from like the others did, Tellem provides the rest of the information for her. Before long, Harry notices that the child doesn't cast a shadow and asks the real Tellem Bond to end the charade to reveal herself. She does, saying she wanted to watch them without them watching back, and that she thought Harry might be the one to figure it out since the mentally incomplete compensate in other ways. She explains that Ignus is a refuge, and that they made it there because they heard her voice calling to them. At least Gaal and Salvor because of their abilities, which people like to call mentallics, but she prefers the term sighted. They're not alone in their abilities, and as Gaal knows, they can make them stand out. In Tellem's case, people misread her abilities as her being a goddess, but many of the others had a much worse response on their home planets, which is evident in the scars that they carry. She thought Ignus could serve as a haven for the sighted, so she called them all there. She's mostly welcoming, but clearly singles Harry out because of his lack of sight, which switches things up because now he's the outsider here. He's not only famous, but he's famously dead, and she says when she looks into his mind, it's very murky in there. She appeared to him as Rach on the beggar to try to figure out how he got his new body, and still has no idea how that happened. She understands that Harry wants to use her people for his plan, and promises to meet the next day because everyone is exhausted after having these new people here. The episode ends with her tipping her hand, though. After they leave, she tells her followers that she's going to find the Prime Radiant and break it, and that there isn't going to be a second Foundation. There hasn't really been a bad episode of Foundation this season. We got another important character introduction, just a ton of stuff happening for multiple characters across both storylines, and maybe the biggest surprise in an episode with plenty of Cleon gold is that a Gaal and Harry scene overshadowed it all. On the structural level, I like that they have the confidence to leave parts of the story out week to week. Not following up with Bel Riose and Hober Mallow allows them to fully realize everything here, just as leaving Brother Day and Gaal out did last week. And weaving the idea of memory into what each of the characters is dealing with gives it a real sense of cohesion. I mentioned a few examples in the beginning, but there are way more. There's a moment at the end when Harry is watching Tellem say she has no idea how he got a body. And it's like a light bulb went off over my head, thinking, oh, he's missing that memory, which is exactly what Dusk and Dawn are worried about. Plus, this is an entire planet of people who can access memories, and we don't know exactly what they can do except for what we've seen from Tellem and Lauren. But I think it's safe to say that more situations will arise where characters aren't sure if they can trust their thoughts or their memories. There was some actual comedy here with Demerzel's fist pump and Day's delivery of "we're engaged." But the thing that really got to me the most was when Dusk tells Rue that the footage we're watching was assembled from many lenses at Gossamer Court. I'm not sure why. It has something to do with the self-referential aspect of it that sort of toes the line of breaking the fourth wall. Even when I think about it now, I can't help but chuckle because obviously they didn't want to make it look like security cam footage, so that line is just perfect. But anyways, there is a lot of fascinating stuff going on in this episode. A surprising amount for an episode that had a shorter runtime than most. What I'm most interested in is how Demerzel reacts to Sareth knowing her secret, and how that will even come up. I don't imagine that she can pull that playful but snarky attitude like she did with Day. Then I'm curious to see how the mentallics use Harry's outsider status against him, and if or how they would try to create a wedge between him and Gaal. Because the second Foundation does need to happen. He explained why that was necessary. And we've seen the loyalty Gaal has to Harry, even if she's reluctant. But then here are these people who understand her, and Salvor, which is to say that it seems like there's potential for things to go off the rails completely in both sides of this story. And that's not to mention that you have Hober Mallow going off on a secret mission. Polly and Constant heading into Trantor on a diplomatic mission, Dawn and Dusk feeling left out and unimportant, and Bel Riose out there with a lot of naval ships learning that the Foundation is outpacing their technology. It's all pretty exciting, and I want to get into all of it. So Tuesday night, I'm going to have Jim and Aaron from Bald Move on for a mid-season live stream so we can have a more in-depth conversation. The final thing I wanted to touch on here was the introduction of mentallics and a little bit of books to show to cap things off. The idea of mentallics is an Asimov idea, and one that he came up with to help solve the problem I mentioned a couple of videos back, that if psychohistory could predict the future, then it was hard to come up with ways to keep things exciting. The show had the advantage of being able to introduce some of these ideas earlier and showcase the effects of having outliers like Gaal and Salvor, and show how they can be disruptive to the plan. It seems like they're putting their own spin on what the term mentallics can actually mean, but what I really like about their approach is the way that having Harry still around connects things together. In this episode, he's forced to reckon with his creation in a way that wasn't possible in the books, and I'm excited to see how they use Jared Harris to deliver some of the human drama that's built into that in the TV format where that works so well. It should be interesting, and I think that's a great place to leave things. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Make sure to join us for the live stream or watch that whenever you get a chance, and I'll talk to you soon.